Hello there, my name's Kaitlin Ferguson and I'm an artist and I work with the Scarborough Museums Trust. I make lots of different types of artwork. I make drawing, printmaking, but I also really like making sculpture, and all of the artwork that I make takes inspiration from the planet around us, and in particular geology. I'm really interested in fossils because they give us lots of amazing clues about the different species that have lived before us on this planet. And so we're going to be creating some fossils today, fossils that are artworks, and they're actually going to be future fossils. They're going to be fossils that represent us now and the different things and our different materials around us. And they're going to be thinking about if a species was to come across us in 1,000,000 years' time, these are perhaps the fossils they might find as clues to who we are. So to get some inspiration, we're going to be thinking about one of the most amazing fossils that is in the collection, and that's of this dinosaur footprint. Now this is what's called a trace fossil, which means it's not necessarily the foot left behind by the dinosaur, but it's the imprint, the trace that's left behind of that footprint. And we're going to be creating our very own trace fossils. Now, what we think about in today's age is we use lots of different materials around us, and one of those materials we use a lot of is plastic, and a lot of that plastic is often thrown away. Now, you can see in this picture from the museum, these are some different plastic objects that were collected on the beach at Scarborough. And the thing about plastic is has the potential to live on for hundreds of years, if not infinitely, and actually far beyond our lifetime. And so these materials that we leave behind are going to leave clues to who we are. So we're going to think really carefully about the materials that we're using today, and we're going to create a future fossil to give clues for people or species in 1,000,000 years' time about who we are. So let's get started. So the materials you're going to need are all connected to a process called plaster casting, which is really simple and straightforward. So we're going to need to make basically a mould, which is a shape that plaster can be poured into, and then the plaster is going to set, which means it's going to go hard. So it's going to go from powder to a liquid, and then it's going to go to a solid. And then we're going to peel that mould off, and then we're going to have our future fossil. So all the materials that you need are here. So you're just going to need some plaster of Paris, and you can get that from kind of online or any arts and crafts shop. You're going to need a bowl for mixing, and you're going to need some clean water. You're also going to need a tray, so a container. So I like to use these takeaway containers because they're made out of foil and they're easy to bend and move. Make sure that you've got a mask to protect yourself because plaster can be quite powdery. And also you're going to need some clay. Now, top tip, make sure it isn't air drying clay because that's going to go hard when the plaster goes hard. Just make sure it's normal ceramic clay or just ordinary clay, just as long as it's not air dry clay. You're going to need a rolling pin. And lastly, you're going to need some materials that represent you or something to do with your life at the moment. And we're going to use those for creating the print. So for me, I've got here some bits of plastic recycling, and I've also got a mask that I've been wearing quite a bit at the moment, and we're going to use those to create prints. First of all, we're going to create the mould for our casting, and you're going to do that by taking a bit of clay, and you're going to pass it between your hands to get rid of the stickiness. You're going to roll it out. And what I do is I roll a little bit and I turn it over, and then I roll it another way. And then I keep doing that. And what that does is it stops it getting stuck onto the surface that you're working on. Now from there, I took the takeaway container and I made sure just to do a quick measurement sort of by eye to make sure it fits, it will fit the bottom of the container. And I decided to stretch out the container just a little bit as well. Now from there, what I did is I just going to make sure that I've got the rough shape of the bottom of the container. And I'm doing that just by getting a pencil and just marking some quick lines. But you could also use a clay tool as well if you've got that. And then from there I can see what's the shape of the bottom of the container going to be. Then what I did is I took the materials that I was going to use and that I'm going to press into the clay to create the trace fossil print. So I took the mask and I folded it up, and I got my rolling pin and I pressed it into the clay. Now you want the clay to be about kind of 2 centimeters thick when it's finished in order so it to be nice and strong. And so I pressed it gently into the clay, but being careful not to push it too thin because we need it to still stay strong. And then from there, I took my other little bits of plastic recycling and I pressed it into the clay to create the different prints and the different shapes. Now, once that's done, you're going to pick up your clay base, and what I'm doing here is I'm just trimming off the edges of any excess clay. That's clay you can use again, so be sure to pop it to one side. I'm just peeling off the clay, and you can either put it into the takeaway container, or if you don't have takeaway containers, you can create a clay wall around your base. Make sure it's a good sort of 5-6 centimeters high and it's completely sealed, and you can pour the plaster into that. But I'm using the takeaway container because it's just a little bit easier, and I know it will be nice and stable, and I'm smoothing it in there. Now it's time to make our plaster. First things first, make sure you've got a mask on, and you are going to want to measure out the plaster so that you've got a ratio of 2 parts plaster to 1 part water. And what I do is I put the water into the bowl first of all, and then I'm going to take different scoops of the plaster from the bag, and I'm going to put it into the water, and that way that helps me keep an eye on the solution as it's kind of going through its process of changing state. So I'm taking out a scoop of the plaster, and what you want to do is you really want to gently shake it into the water, being careful basically all the time not to stir it around and get air bubbles in it. That's the one thing we don't want, because air bubbles will make the final plaster much weaker and it may crack. So over time you'll start to notice that the water is starting to get thicker, and you'll see that the plaster will settle on the top like a little sort of set of islands, and that's how you know that there's enough plaster, that the solution is saturated. And what I'm doing gently with my fingers, and I'm making sure that there's no bumps, being careful not to stir it and avoid air bubbles. And then when you feel that it's starting to turn kind of from single cream to double cream in thickness, that means it's nearly ready. So tap the edges of the bowl to get rid of any final air bubbles. And then you're going to take your mould from earlier, which is your clay, and you're going to be pouring the plaster into the mould really, really carefully. And I'm just gently scooping it out here. And I'm going to pour it to nearly to the top so that it covers most of the clay. And then just like before, I'm going to tap the edges of the mould. And then it's basically time to leave it to wait to set. So here I'm gently peeling off the foil first of all, and then I want to peel off the clay, doing this really carefully as not to rip any of the intricate design on the future fossil. And there we go, there's the fossil revealed. So this is my future fossil of my different materials. Then after that, what you can do is you can leave your fossil to dry completely for 1 to 2 days, and then after that you can paint it. And I probably would recommend something like an acrylic paint to paint it if you wanted to, or if you wanted to just clean it, you could get a toothbrush and with a little bit of water really, really gently clean off any clay if there is any. But I think I might leave mine as it is because I really like it in the white. So I really hope you've enjoyed learning about fossils and this idea of future fossils, and also learning all about the process of plaster casting. We'd love to see how you get on, so please send in some pictures of your future fossils, and I'll hopefully see you at the museum again soon. Take care, bye.